Is there a recount? Just kidding. We're going to do quick introductions. And of course, we're going to go from last to first. We'll start with Jason. What are you going to be talking about and where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm calling in from Chicago. I'm Jason Bressler. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at United Wholesale Mortgage. We'll talk a little bit about how the pandemic has kind of reshaped IT and the business together and made a huge impact as far as IT is concerned, and how that really is generating a ton of great interest for IT individuals in particular, and how it's really integrated into business strategy.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. All right, Ed, where are you calling in from and what are you talking about?
Sure. Hey, Ed McLaughlin with Mastercard. I run operations and technology for Mastercard, joining you from Purchase, New York. And a lot we can talk. I'll talk about anything you want to talk about, but we're seeing how the pandemic has impacted consumer behavior, shifts in behavior we're seeing, how we're using devices, and what that means.
Very, very cool. All right, Mico, where are you calling from? What are you going to talk about?
Hello, Ray. So I'm calling from Atlanta, and I'm hopefully going to bring the data storytelling aspect to this pandemic, because God knows we've heard a lot of stories and we've seen a lot of data. So I think it'll be exciting.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, hi, I'm Ray Wang with Constellation Research here on DisrupTV with awesome producer Elle, and then Vala's going to take it from here. And before we do that, just want to let everyone know that this show is sponsored by Robots and Pencils. If you're looking for design, you're looking for innovation, definitely check them out. We'll talk more about them a little bit later. So let's go to show. Ready, Vala?
I'm ready.
Three. All right, Elle, tell us what to do.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send us, Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests, your questions using hashtag DisrupTV, and we'll do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He is the best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business. He's a regular contributor to ZDNet, Harvard Business Review, and television business and technology news like Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, and others. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my awesome co-host, co-founder, DisrupTV, Vala Afshar, and as he said, the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce. But what does that mean? That means he's out there inspiring. He's actually creating innovation. He's helping people understand what's next. And more importantly, you're seeing him on business TV, lots of keynotes, lots of events. And of course, he's an author himself, and you can see him on ZDNet, where you're going to see all the insights from the show when he publishes from these each session. But it's not about us. It's about our awesome guests. And who do we have to start with today, Vala?
We have an amazing lineup, and we'll start our show this week with Mico Yuk, founder of BI Brainz and BI Dashboard Formula methodology, where she has trained thousands globally on how to strategically use power of data visualization to enhance decision-making process. Her inventive approach fuses enterprise visual storytelling with proprietary BI Dashboard Formula methodology. Mico's ability to strategically use the power of data visualization to enhance the decision-making process has been sought out by several high-profile Fortune 500 companies. She's the author of Data Visualization for Dummies. She's a global keynote speaker at some of the biggest and most prestigious data and analytics conferences, and named as the top 50 analytics blogger to follow. Welcome, Mico, to DisrupTV.
Man, you guys, I'm all blushing. Welcome. Excited to be here. How are you?
Great to have you.
We're doing great. Hey, you can't go to an event without seeing Mico, and especially Mico online. So this is really awesome. And we're glad to have you finally on DisrupTV. And what I really want to talk about is what you're doing, right? Because you always say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but there's a lot of data and we often don't get the picture. So talk about like what you're doing to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, again, thank you for the intro. Excited to be here. And so what we focus on at BI Brainz is really helping people to understand like how to take data and make sense of it, so to tell a story. And I think what's exciting is we have both a pandemic and then we have an election combined, and there's a lot of stories that are being told, whether they're true or not.
Yep.
And so I think data storytelling is front and center. What we've been essentially doing, besides training people digital, which right now, especially with being like virtual, it's like super duper important that you are telling the correct story with data, because we no longer have the ability to touch and to feel and, you know, to have those different like one-on-one emotional cues that we used to have. So it's important to really tell stories with the data. So what we've been doing is, besides helping companies to make sense of what's going on in all areas, whether it's in their HR, their sales, their marketing, whatever it is, we've really been focused, honestly, Ray, on digital and training. I mean, we just did a training. We had Intel in there. We had leaders from Microsoft, like just all over the world attend. And the questions are all the same. I have all this data. Please help me to understand how to communicate it, right? Storytelling is all about communication. So that's really what we do. And we have done a little bit of volunteering. We also allowed some students to come in scholarship wise, right? Because we feel like it has to get out there earlier. Yeah, we did some scholarships. We also allowed people who were laid off. We gave out some other scholarships. We said, if you're laid off, you need to get to the next level. You can come in. And so we have people who are laid off apply. So, you know, we're doing a small part where we can, you know, and just doing our best to really bring some competency to the data, to be frank with you.
Sure. You mentioned the election. I mean, all of us, I'm assuming, watching those magic boards and, you know, tallying up data and numbers and try to tell a story that could speak to where we were heading. It was Steve Jobs who said the most powerful person in business is the storyteller.
Absolutely.
And it's, you know, we all so believe that to be true. And we also know that the human, you know, our brains, when we look at pictures and when we can visualize data, we can process it 60, 70 times faster than just text and written words. So tell us a little bit more about why storytelling and data visualization and just understanding how to make better, faster, more informed decisions is so much more important now, given what has happened this year in terms of this, you know, incredible impact to business due to the pandemic.
Well, there's a few things that come to mind. So first of all, talking about the election, I have to admit to you that even though I don't care for politics, the one thing I look forward to with the elections is the level of storytelling, data wise, that appears. And I go through site to site, and I have to admit, I know you guys are vendor agnostic, but I love The Guardian. So I went from site to site, looked at their analytics, and like as a storyteller, sure. I'm not going to call pretty good. I'm not going to talk to any sites, but I went to a few and I was like, this storyteller, he's or she's, you know, this is crap. And I opened them and then I was like, The Guardian. I sent my team like a text. I was like on Slack. I'm like, dude, whoever built this is it. So a little bit of a junkie there. But like, yeah, it's, you know, there's a lot of stories that was told, but Guardian, mwah, love you. Absolutely love you. Best in the game, super inspired. If you haven't seen it, that's the best story that was told about actually the election. Now, getting back to your question around kind of why it's important. Well, first of all, where we see this being, you know, there's a lot of information about storytelling, but I think where I see it most important, I run a fairly balanced company. And when I say that age-wise, I have Gen Xers, Gen Zers almost, right? And I have millennials, and then I have the next generation. And so even internally to us, I've had to learn, because I'm a millennial, and I've had to learn, like, these kids have no attention span. And so a lot of times...
Wait, I thought we had no attention span.
Right. Well, we were supposed to be the ones, but what I learned is a lot of the leaders, because we attract a lot of analytics and data leaders that come into our sessions with their teams. We see like an age gap, and I'm not being discriminatory, but what we see is they're both sometimes gathering the information from one generation that's older, trying to get a younger generation to take action. Does that make sense? And so what we're doing is we have a framework and technique that we use that, honestly, I hate to say it, it's like millennial bread. That's sad to say, but what it is that we've gamified the process essentially in how you talk to individuals to get the story, and then turn it into something, into an analytic that could be operationalized and fed to what we think is any generation, but particularly also the next generation coming. You know, for a long time, I've talked and I said, listen, my generation attention span was 5 to 8 seconds. These kids speak emoji language. That is not English. Okay. The stories that they're listening to are not human anymore. Okay. And so if we don't learn to bridge that gap, you know, all these, for instance, we do a lot of business with oil and gas and CPG. Well, if you know the consumer products good market, you know that they are trying. How many rooms have I sat in where they're going, what do these kids buy? What do they buy? How do they buy this stuff? I don't know if it's Kim Kardashian needs to eat the cereal. I mean, I've sat in these boardrooms where they're sitting down going, how do we find out what they buy, right? Because we work with some of the largest cereal companies and soda companies. You know, cereal has been declining for 12 to 14% for the last decade. You guys know this stuff, right? You're in the industry. Yep. And I've been brought into those boardrooms to go, how do we reach this audience? And we tell them, listen, the stories you're telling are not working. Okay. Yeah. The stories that you told my parents about get up in the morning, make sure you grab your Wheaties. Anybody remember that? Have a big bowl of cereal. And when you sit down, you're going to get 2 grams of this and 4 grams of fiber. What we found out, and I'm not calling any of my customers names because they could be on here watching, is my generation, especially the generation after, we don't do packaged food. We don't want to do it. We don't want to do a box on the top of the fridge, you know? And I remember sitting in a boardroom with a generation further than mine. I don't want to call age groups, and having to say to them, I said, look, I'm a millennial and I don't have this packaged stuff in my fridge. I said, you guys have got to have different stories. And so even you guys will appreciate this. One of those companies, as a good example, they have all these warehouses where they produce their product. The average age group is 55 in the warehouse. Oh, yeah. So they brought us in to say, hey, we need to get them on analytics, but we can't even get them to use it. Do you know what I found out? I found out that because the owners, this is a multi-billion-dollar company that's family owned, will not purchase something like an iPad to tell a story with on analytics, they cannot retain an age group lower than 55. So we deal with a lot of complex things, which is how do you help them to take this data and make sense, honestly, to one generation, but still appeal to a new generation? I feel like that's more becoming the crux of what we're dealing with. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It's actually amazing to hear you talk about oil and gas, which I suspect the majority of their history are thinking about upstream parts of their business. And now they're thinking downstream where they're touching the consumer. And they're thinking about, well, you know, how do we connect to a downstream audience, like you said, who has, so they're asking for precision, relevant, and concise channel. And it could be TikTok, it could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, you know, probably not the channels that they're used to. We just did research at Salesforce that says an average customer connects with a brand across 10 different channels, average. So I can't imagine a legacy company or a digital immigrant company, meaning a company that wasn't born in the cloud, they're not mobile, they're not social, which is a lot of companies trying to figure this out. So how do you, when you're when you're in front of business leaders, guide them in terms of cultivating a data-driven culture? Like, how do you, where do they start? What do they need to do? So,
you know, Ray, you have more of a background with me, but one thing that's big for me that's always been is I like to have fun. So it's actually a check mark for me. I've been doing this for a while, not arrogant. And by the way, Vala Afshar, I grew up in oil and gas, literally. And so that led me, I actually used to live in the Middle East. I lived in Qatar and Dubai, worked with Qatar Gas, worked with Shell, worked with Exxon. Yeah. So I and my dad and them were oil and gas execs. So I grew up in oil and gas, and that's a very old industry, you know. But to answer your question, one of the things that I emphasize to them, first of all, is one, we have to bring some fun into this. And I know that sounds kind of boring, but like I keep saying, look, if we get in and the ties are here, and I just tell them, I'm like, I can't do it. I'm like, Mico Yuk is out. Like, are we willing to have fun? And once I get a little bit of a nod, then we get into, all right, guys, let's not get robotic. Let's get the robotic language out. It's not, we don't have to talk about data and data literacy, all these big words. What are we trying to do here? Right? We're trying to get people to use an asset. What's the asset? Data. Well, like anything else, if you think about, for instance, like Toys R Us, like anything else, why don't we gamify it? Why don't we make it fun? And so what we do is we actually, I don't know if you guys have you guys ever read The Hero Journey by Joseph Campbell? Yeah. You guys ever heard that book?
Yes.
I have, but I haven't read it. No.
Amazing. Okay, so you know what it's about though. So it talks about what Hollywood does, which is, you know, they prop these heroes up, but that book goes into philosophy and all these other ways. And so what we basically help them understand is how to make the end user the journey and how to realize that they are just the guides. And that's a very complex relationship because I think old school is, you know what, we're the leaders, you know, you're going to do what we say. I say, guys, that hammer, that like Flintstone hammer doesn't work anymore. It doesn't, right?
Departure.
departure.
Initiation.
Right.
Return.
Right. So we try to change that perception. And then once we get there, we have, or in our framework, we teach them the 4 parts of data. Very simple. You have a goal, you have these top metrics, we have the trends, we have the actions. We actually explain the relationships between all 4 of them. We give them literally a script, help them to extract the information out into these different we call it storyboard segments. So everything we do is on our storyboard. And then from there, we produce stories again that, it's not just analytics. Like one of the things that I try to help executives think about is everything is not an analytic. Everything is not a chart. And this is something that I had to emphasize. Everything is not a dashboard. I tell them once we get to the end game solution, this could be an app. It could be a widget, right? We have to think about where's the user and how can we get to them. So again, it's a bit of a process, but for me, honestly, it starts off with being fun. And I typically just have to shift the perception first about how this game is going to work. I treat it as a game, so I have a good time.
Sounds like it. That's good.
But, a lot of this is really, getting that storytelling. And the other approach is the biblical approach. The world's on fire. Everything's about to fall apart. Here's what's going on. You need to act now, right? So you see the burning, all these oil platforms. You see these burning platforms, right, that pop up, right? And the question is really like how to get people excited about it. But most people are still not in the phase of what to do with the data, right? So you're doing a little bit more with what you're doing in terms of it's not just here's the data. You're also recommending next best actions. Talk a little bit more about that as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was something, honestly, Ray, that helped to build my career around the world. I've spoken at MIT, Facebook, all these different keynotes. And it's because of the fact that I was younger. Remember, I was younger. Now I might have wrinkles or whatever. But when I was in my 20s, I was very focused. I was working in New York, and I remember looking at a dashboard. I think it was a Pfizer, and I'm like, what do we do with this? Where's the action? Why do people have to go elsewhere to figure it out? And so one of the key game changers, I think, in what we do is our only focus is action, but even further, we're focused on operationalizing the analytics. This is really important. A lot of analytics just stops at trends. And even if they put the action or some form of it, you still have to look and go, okay, here's my analytic over here. Here's the action over there. We try and drive them into, listen, put the operationalization, the action in the actual analytic. And so we're definitely trying to push people a bit forward. I'll tell you that much. But it's not as easy as you think.
Doug Henschens on our team always talks about embedded analytics, right? And we've been talking about next best actions and pulling that together. And that's why I really wanted to point that out, because I know you're doing something different there.
It's super hard. It's super hard to do. My litmus test in terms of when people say digital transformation, and they kind enough to invite me to better understand their operation and their workflows. So you're right, describing the past. So, they mature from descriptive use of analytics to diagnostic use of analytics to predictive. And that's when they start to use algorithms. And then the holy grail is, it's great to know the winning lottery number for Saturday, but if you don't buy those exact numbers, prescriptive use of analytics, it means nothing. So many think that predicting is the end game, and it's not.
No.
But my question to you is, which line of business have you noticed since the pandemic maybe is really maturing towards greater adoption of prescriptive use, whether it's sales, service, marketing, commerce? They're actually taking action in real time, following the insights that your company or other enterprise applications are providing to them. Is it 10%? Is it 20%? I find most of them still are in the first half, descriptive diagnostic, to be honest with you. I don't even see strong use of predictive.
We have I've trained over 10,000 people, and we have a huge community of our own. I go in and I ask all the time, because I pull out the data maturity curve, right? We all know it, right? Data information insight. I will tell you up front, 80% of the room is right in the data to information. And it's always shocking to me, because I'm like, wait, don't you own every BI advanced tool in the market? Like, didn't you just buy, Vala Afshar, didn't you just buy Einstein? Like, is it on the shelf? Like, what are we doing here? And they'll say, I don't know what we bought, Mico, but this is where we are.
Mico, call me up when they say that. I want to jump in a conversation. We spent billions. We as a company have spent billions trying to get to that advanced prescriptive. So it's you're right. It's so
it is tough.
What I call the consumption gap. It's what they're using versus the capability.
That's
you take my company, we have 3 releases a year. So we're introducing hundreds of new features and functions. but even our most advanced customers are using maybe 10%.
But do you know why, Vilashar? And that's what we teach. One of the first steps of our framework is teaching people how to emotionally tap in. So there was a scientist called Antonio Damasio a while back. I'll make this short. He did a study. And one of the things that he found is that we as humans make decisions first with our emotions, and then we use data to back it up. The problem we have is that the way information is being thrown around, people actually think that the more data you give me is the more decisions I'm going to make. What you actually do instead mentally is you trigger off analysis paralysis. And so I end up going into a mode of frenzy versus making decisions. And so I think what happens with that gap is also, it's a lot of emotion. The journey is not there. And that's where we come in, because we get a lot of projects that are, hey, we bought this tool, they won't touch it. Right? It's like a donkey.
We get a lot of adoption issues.
Yeah.
A ton of adoption issues.
Ton of adoption. And we ask them, what story are you telling? So sometimes, to be honest, some of the stories that we help companies with, it's not just take your data and create a story. We're literally creating the journey. We are naming the initiative. We are literally giving them the one-liner that's going to be written across the door, printed on the elevator. And we say, look, you have to keep repeating this, like Make America Great Again. I had to throw that in.
So I think, therefore,
Make data great again.
It's a really
Make
good book,
data
right? So Descartes' Error, Emotion, Reason, and the Human Brain. That's definitely a good book. But hey, we're going to end on that, and I'm going to show up on your show at some point. I think I saw your invite. I will work on that. But we're here with Mico Yuk, co-founder and CEO at BI Brainz. Check them out, and check out Mico when she's back on Twitter at MICOYUK. And more importantly, thanks for being on the show. So I'll see you in Atlanta one of these days, hopefully soon.
Thank you, guys. Okay, bye.
All right, bye-bye.
That was great. It's true, like, a river without boundaries is a puddle. And so it looks like Mico and her team are providing a framework in terms of how to become better storytellers. And what an honor for us with our second guest. We have Ed McLaughlin, President Operations and Technology at Mastercard. Ed is member of the company's management committee. He oversees Mastercard's technology functions, including the global network, processing platforms, global technology hubs, information security, and technology operations. Prior to his role, Ed was the Chief Information Officer responsible for development efforts for products and services, implementing the IT digital roadmap, and managing development of Mastercard's global tech hubs. And then prior to that, he was the Chief Emerging Payments Officer. So incredible depth and breadth of knowledge, leading deployment of companies' digital strategy, partnerships, and platforms. He's member of the Harvard Kennedy Business School's Council on the Responsible Use of AI, Artificial Intelligence. We're going to talk about that. And participated in the 2018 White House Summit on AI for American Industries. Welcome, Ed, to DisrupTV.
I've often said about intros, it's like having a happy birthday son. No matter what. So, great to be with you.
I had to cut your bio short because we only have 20 minutes. You've done a lot. So
it's great to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, look, we're really excited to have you. We want to get your insights on the pandemic. I mean, we're now 7 months out. We're learning a lot of different lessons about behaviors. So let's talk about tech strategy. And this is what we've been having discussions on every month at our CXO talks that we're doing at home. Like, we're basically doing like these like CIO, CEN, executive network sessions. And everybody wants to know what's going to stay and what's going to change, right? So let's start there in terms of like, how's this impacted your technology landscape, but what's going to change and what's going to stay?
All right, so let's talk about what changes first. We went into this. One of the things, and we had to say to the board, look, we were right. The resiliency of what we had to do. Now, unlike a lot of the tech that we talk about, we're running national critical infrastructure. Literally every country around the world. We have 2.5 billion accounts. First thing we said is every one of those is somebody's salary, if they're saving, find a credit from you if they expect. So our emphasis is resiliency, making sure it's there. So that was the same. What changed though is we're also running a massive uncontrolled experiment in consumer behavior. And the shifts we were seeing, and one of the visibilities is almost like Mico was talking about, the storytelling that's coming out of the data, where you can see from what people are buying, how they're shopping, how they're shifting. Real tremendous insights of what was going on. So what we saw is this massive acceleration, shift in online buying. We used to call it card not present. People would interact through a digital card. That digital intermediation was moving 2 to 3% a year. We're up to about 40%. Projected you're 3-4 years out from where you finally go primary digital. That happened in the first quarter of this year.
Wow.
Massive shift in spending. You see rotation out of things like obviously travel and restaurants and things like that to home improvement, subscription services look huge. Context of how people are shopping, what they're buying is changing. And what we're trying to handicap is how much of that becomes permanent shift behavior. Exactly. How much has this been like a massive experimentation which will lead to a persistent change? How much is anomalous based on the situation? But what it did mean is things like the network resiliency, underlying capabilities for contactless payments, digital payments, and other things like that accelerated that. You had to be ready for it and keep up for it. But it didn't necessarily being a projection. Just got here a whole lot faster.
Wow. And, MasterCard is a revered brand. MasterCard is a trusted brand. But let's talk about trust in 2020. Obviously, we've had the healthcare crisis. And, prior to the show, we were talking about several states going back to lockdowns and curfews. We've had, obviously, an economic crisis because of the health crisis, racial inequality, healthcare, climate crisis with the flooding and the fires in this country, misinformation disseminated at scale. So there is a trust deficit. And so you wrote a beautiful article, an incredibly balanced, rich article. Why should anyone trust AI? And you noted in your article, and it was very balanced. You noted that consumers may not trust AI as much as we think. In fact, only 25% of consumers trust AI decisions more than decisions made by humans. In your article, where you cited that research, and only less than 30% were comfortable with businesses using AI. But you said that there's no denying that AI can do great things. You talked about fraud detection. You talked about chatbots accelerating and streamlining service. You talked about lots of case studies that speak to benefits of AI to society and companies, where now employees can work on more creative, more challenging, more important work that can be for betterment of society. Can you talk to us a little bit about your article and this balanced approach, which you talked about biases, and you talked about the importance of really understanding that it's just a tool. AI isn't a business model or a strategy. It's just a tool. So it's how we use technology to ensure business can be the greatest platform for change. I love your thoughts just summarizing that article that you wrote.
Like every tool would have. So there's so much there. Let me sort of break it into 3 sections. I think you're right on. I think there's a crisis in trust broadly. You even look at the conversations around the U.S. election,
sure,
what people are trusting, what they're believing. You look at the techlash that's happening. There's just a great uncertainty where people aren't sure what's going on, and in many ways they're assuming the worst. They feel like there's a screw in there somewhere, and they just don't know where it is. And how do I find it? So we actually think that establishment of trust is essential. And we've always talked a lot about security, right? We'll keep the bad guys from getting you. We're much more concerned, okay, are you a good steward of my information? Not will someone take it, but what are you doing with it? I think that becomes the foundation for a lot of things like AI, facial recognition, other uncertainties. Start with that. I really do think you need to earn and deserve that. So we've done things that you may have seen published a Consumer's Bill of Rights. Here's how we handle your data. Simple things like transparency. We'll tell you exactly what we collect on you. We'll tell you exactly what we collect on you. Tell you how we're using it. We're going to use it for anything which isn't directly the service. It's a full opt-in. Great things to do it. And we'll use that. Make the service you use that. Talk to consumers like, hey, we'd like to fight fraud. So, you'll be able to get the transaction done and you don't have to worry about the bad guys too much. But they want to understand what's going on. Owe it to consumers. Simple, comprehensible. In the absence of that, I do think there's a bias against that that's been well earned. That's what you're seeing played out with the techlash, testimony before Congress, data privacy regulation. We all need to get in front of doing the right thing by consumers. Now that leads to how do you use it, and where I think a lot of AI comes in. That's also the idea where it just gets kind of simple. Not only wouldn't a general civilian understand, look at some of the problems around explainability. It's like alien intelligence. You know it's predicting better. You just don't quite know why, and perhaps we never will. Right? When we switched from trying to model cognitive behavior to simply race outcomes and pick the one with the best outcome, regardless of how it got there, explainability really did fall away. So when we think about that, about how you're using it, so the impact it's going to have, I break it into 3 big sections. One of which is just eliminating work. That's where people are afraid of the jobless future. It's always fun to accuse a futurist of lack of imagination. Everyone thinks there's going to be a jobless future. You know, my lists have lists. There's always so much to do. So maybe I'm an inveterate optimist, but I think whether it was harnessing animal, mechanical, electrical, now cognitive power, how you constantly eliminate where some of the value can be created. And we got to help people through it. We got to train them through it. But I think that is profoundly hopeful. Second block, and where we're seeing the most benefit today, I think, is in human-computer interaction. You quoted Steve Jobs earlier, the famous bicycles, right? So we do a lot of AI right now on our operations side, which is just weirdness today, right? No one can contemplate that much information compared to what's there. But what it does, it just flags it to an intelligent human actor to say, hey, something odd's going on here. We should probably take a look. That makes people so much more effective. Yeah. It's like those 7-league boots that you do. So again, when they talk about AI replacing what people can do, I think it's the great augmentation. And I'll give you a really simple one. In fact, how I got into technology a long, long time ago. I am a horrific speller. It's literally a cognitive problem I have. And when I found out there was this box that would tell me that I wouldn't look like an idiot because it could tell me whether or not I spelled it wrong and I could focus on the content. That's probably a reason for both of us why we have these jobs. Yeah. You know, and didn't get, put in a special desk to try to learn how to spell, right? The machine. I actually think it's going to take away people's cognitive capability, ultimately augment it. So we can get more out of more people to generate. Probably the coolest part. I think is the value we need to do a better job explaining to people. Where we can create value that literally humans couldn't. That's where I use the example of our fraud detection. Right? What gets really cheap? Prediction gets really cheap. So we had something we built into our network we call safety net. Literally, it's this engineering marvel. It's this engineering marvel, right? It has about 2 billion account ranges, 200 analytical.
Wow.
Updated one after for every transaction that flows through it. Operates every transaction. But what it means is we had a 6-time decrease, 6x, in false positives.
Wow.
So that blunt thing where you're trying to do it, it says, no, I don't believe it's you, and you got to go through some rigmarole. That is huge. And a 3 times increase in bad stuff that we actually caught, which is a couple of $1 billion. I don't even remember what the figure is. Billions of dollars of fraud stopped in the system. That's applying intelligence that operates faster than any human ever could. And the other thing is, because as soon as you start blocking fraud, really intelligent actors on the other side start changing their pattern. The idea to be constantly adaptable. It's benefiting everyone, but it's new value generating. Yeah. That's why we have to explain. Here's how we know it's right. Here's how we know it's removing positives, stopping fraud. How we are taking that data you trust you with, using to do it something that's really benefits.
That's awesome. And the system's getting smarter over time. And the system's getting smarter over
really
time
does.
With every interaction. I mean, one of the things I liked about your AI ethics piece, right? Because we've been talking a lot about it. Like the transparency of the algorithms is really important. Being explainable is important. Getting it reversible, super important, right? And then learning from that, training that model over time, and then actually making sure it's human directed, because otherwise we get Skynet.
I think the human directed is really important. A couple of things on that, though. One of which I hate to argue with some of my friends. I think much of the human in the loop is spurious. Bad behavior, right? It's like when there's 16 signatures on something, you don't read it. So what we are seeing is, even though you're saying this is a checkpoint, people get so inured to it being easily have to really question the effectiveness of it. So we're even doing things like, if we have a human in the loop, we actually salt it, kind of like you do a fishing exercise.
Yep.
Say, let's put a bad one in that we know is not going to go all the way through to see if they're actually catching it. Actually test the effectiveness of the control. One of the things I'll jump off on that one. I think we're actually often using the wrong metaphor. Technology and corporate business, we talk about AIs, because we're comparing it to coding. Right? You code something, it becomes an executable, it runs forever exactly. AI is constant management. Particularly if you look at the systems we do where the output of the AI actually impacts the inputs to the model. The block fraud, the patterns of use. So concept drift and a lot of other things like that become really, really essential. We're missing the active, dynamic nature of the integration. Then the final piece we talked about in the article I would like to bring up too is about bias in AI.
Yeah.
So the explainability is essential. You need to know you can trust the outcome. We're never actually going to be able to unpack how it gets there. So we actually have top and tail AI models that collar our big engine just so we can see if there's concept here, rather than trying to limit it to what to do. But all of the questions around bias, in fact, your data questions, lots of terrible data.
Yeah.
Bias comes out. I'll give you one example I worked on early on, which I think is when you were doing language translation. Went from a non-gendered language like Turkish to a gendered one. It would guess. Yeah. And it would say she's a nurse and he's a doctor. You're like, the AI's bad. No, it just had poor role models. Right? This is just trained on millions of documents and making a prediction.
Right.
When you talk about things like, well, we are okay with bug books, cops have, but not with constant surveillance facial recognition. So I think a lot of what we thought of as privacy is just mistaken obscurity. And we're now forced to address. And a lot of things we don't like in society that are real and are in the data, we also have to address. Things we look at is how do you put a rule in that'll actually rebalance prior biases. You can detect it. Now you can see it. So make the gender, yes, 50-50. Wow. I will also say at the time I was testing it, if you put in jerk and a few other colorful phrases, it always defaulted to male. It was working. Test it out. It works. Anyway.
We will, actually. It's too tempting. So
yeah. And then the final piece, though, is, and this gets back to regulation. Point I have been called to testify. Have to recognize, like electricity, like general purpose technology.
Sure.
You don't say we need regulation on wheels. Well, you're building a watch or a cart. We're afraid all the hod carriers will lose their job through cart technology. Yeah, but I'm building a watch. So I think it's really important what society needs to think.
But Ed, wheels are dangerous. You might get run over.
Right. So what society needs to think about is what are our principles?
Yeah.
That is what we need from government. That is what we need from civil society. You shouldn't kill other folks. Okay. If you're going to have a wheel-based vehicle, it shouldn't run people over. I think we can all agree to that. It's not a reason not to do it. Confusing practices and principles. Conversations. So if we can say what do we believe, what do we think is right, higher truth, and then we can make sure all of these powerful new techniques are advancing principles. You can fight bias with AI. Subject to how you apply the technology.
And my last question, Ray and I last year had the privilege of being on stage and interviewing Vint Cerf, the inventor of TCP/IP,
yes.
and Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web. And we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the web. And it was a recognition, it was a UN event, that 50% of humanity had just crossed access to the internet. So when we talk about digital payments, when we talk about accelerated adoption of 5G, there's certain still emerging technologies where we still have 3+ billion that are not connected to the internet. Can you talk to us quickly about the rise of 5G and what that means, and digital payments and what that means for Mastercard? Because your new CEO said, we're a global company, but we think locally. So, there's a balance at Mastercard where you want to serve everyone as much as you can.
Yeah, and this is the pledge
60 seconds or less.
60 seconds or less. We said the Internet of Everything must lead to the inclusion of everything.
Wow.
Even if we connect you, if
Bravo.
you can't participate economically, you're still cut off, right? The things we take for granted, education, the entertainment, the travel, the commerce opportunities, we need to provide to everyone. So having a real ID, valid ID, and having access to the financial systems. So I will say, I'll end on this one. One of the things I'm very proud of. Whether you're in any country in the world, if you're a Social Security recipient in South Africa, that 6-digit Mastercard number you get is every bit as good as mine in Manhattan. What it does on the network and how it works. And our job is to make sure this is available to everyone in the right context for what they need.
That's awesome. That's
great.
fantastic.
We are here with Ed McLaughlin, President in Operations and Technology at Mastercard. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights, especially on post-pandemic and what's next.
You're terrific. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, sir. Wow. Imagine how hard it is when you have millions of clientele around the world and have that single source of truth and consistency. Okay, this is what we traditionally call our cleanup hitter spot, where our last guest comes in and hits a grand slam with their wisdom. Jason Bressler, the Chief Technology Officer at United Wholesale Mortgage. With more than 25 years of IT experience in the mortgage banking industry, Jason excels in application development and enterprise implementation, specifically at mortgage companies that have started small and truly taken a leap into stratosphere of the industry, utilizing technology and practices that Jason and his team bring to the table. Jason and his team are constantly developing intuitive technology platforms that can help independent mortgage brokers grow their business. Under his leadership, UWM has set the tone for the entire mortgage industry. They're number one in their space by reaching to clients quickly, efficiently, at scale. He currently leads a team of 850 IT staff. Ray, can you imagine leading 850? We want to learn all the lessons learned during the pandemic, remotely managing such an extraordinary and large team. So welcome, Jason, to DisrupTV.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great having you.
Hey, welcome. The real question is, how many laptops did you have to buy? No, I'm kidding.
A lot. I had to buy a lot.
Was it the text to Michael Dell, like, hey, can you help?
It was just insane. You know what we ended up doing? We just told everybody, come in and take what you have and get back to your house, and we'll just FaceTime you and show you how to set it up.
So, no, but hey, we've been talking a lot about lessons learned, what's happening post-pandemic for CIOs and CTOs. So what's staying the same and what's changing for you guys?
I think, first of all, I don't think anything is staying the same anymore. And I think that's the best possible outcome that we in IT could have ever hoped for. And so, one of the things I think that's happened a lot, and we've heard it here both from Mico and from Ed, is it's always about the story that you tell. And so what's happened traditionally in IT firms, especially IT firms that don't just produce a product, they're not a technology, they are a technology team working inside of another team or another company. And so what typically happens is we never have CIOs, CTOs, anybody in IT. We don't typically get that seat at the table. What usually happens is business strategy is driven. It's told to IT. It says, this is what we have. This is what we're going to do. How are you going to help support us with that? And I think the pandemic changed everything. I call it hero ball, but that's a lot of us. We just picked up the ball and scored as many points as we possibly could, as quick as we possibly could, right? So we could get everybody home and keep the business running. All of a sudden what happened is the CEOs and the COOs, they all turned around and they're like, oh crap, you're really good at what you do. We need to actually take notice of this. And all of a sudden we all got a seat at the table where it wasn't anymore, hey, this is what we're doing. What do you like? How are you going to support it? We were thinking this might be a good idea. What do you think? And can you start solutioning for us? And that really is about the story, because the story is everything. Once you can change the narrative as a CIO, a CTO, and actually show that you do drive solution, you actually do produce data lakes, and you have all this great tooling and platform that you can turn back over, it changes the game for all of us, and it changes the game for all of the businesses. And so that's really what I think has been the biggest lesson learned. The one piece I think a lot of people are saying, and this is what happens to a lot of us that happen to get into IT, is we're shy and we're nerdy and We don't like to be very outspoken. This is the time, like when it's there, you gotta strike, gotta go after. It's why I say it all the time that fortune favors the bold. It's one of those things, like when it happens, you gotta jump on it as quickly as you possibly can and seize it, because there will not be another opportunity when the vaccine's actually out, you know. And I will be very interested to see, as I'm sure we all are going to be very interested to see what happens when life kind of goes back to normal. Because all these companies have said, hey, I'm going to let you work from home forever. I seriously doubt that's really going to happen, right? Because the best IT gets done in conversations and walkthroughs, and that doesn't happen when you're sitting at home for the most part. And so, you know, seize it now and then just run with it.
Definitely.
Right. Most of the clients that my company serves, I noticed the first 90 days of the pandemic, and I say 90 days US specifically. So March, April, May, you know, they were in a stabilization mode. They needed to figure out how to conduct remote work and how to do it securely and how to scale. Many clients needed to lean into new technologies like e-commerce and contactless payments and curbside pickup. And they didn't have it. So really 90 days of just stabilizing and accelerating adoption of certain new technologies. We had McKinsey on the show a month or so ago, and they said about 10 years of e-commerce adoption just in the last 3 months. And then we had the head of technology at Accenture, Paul Daugherty, who said, yeah, he saw about 5 years of culture and digital transformation in the last few months. Culture meaning, you know, leaders understanding and trusting that people can be productive from home. You can sell, market, service, commerce, and even IT. What were the stories you had to share with your 850 IT staff during those early pandemic months to ensure that, you know, they didn't panic, they kept the eye on the ball? If they were in the red zone, they scored a touchdown. Like, what were those difficult conversations, or maybe not so difficult, depending on the culture and how, you know? And it looks like you're a great storyteller. You don't look like a nerd or a geek. So,
thank you.
Which, by the way, I see them with affectionately. I'm a nerd and a geek.
I am too.
What did you have to do to like rally the troops behind you?
So it really was a lot of rallying. And so, you know, one of the things, and we talked about it here too, is it's almost not so much the experience and the technology sometimes as it is the people and the culture, and that you've really got the right people working for you, that when you need them, when you need them to buy in, you've got to spend the time cultivating them, because you never know when the opportunity is going to come. So when it's here now, I spent a lot of time just basically going, and I told everybody this is what we had to do. It was just full transparency and open kimono, and show everybody this is what we do. This is how we do it, and let people start to pick it apart, even though they have no idea in hell what they are talking about. They've never been in IT. They don't know what any of our processes means. Like, they heard robotics and they come out and we're like, so what's going to happen with robotics? Or is somebody going to come and actually type on my key? Nope. But let's explain to you what that actually means. And so
there is that in USA Today. Come on, Jason.
Yeah, well, I don't want to tell them that yet. That's the thing. And so, so what we really did was, you know, I spent a lot of time in just explaining let's get transparent, and then let's start turning some of that tooling back over to the business and let them start playing with things that they don't actually understand yet, but we're going to get some great ideas from it. And what really happened was, you know, like I say, it's like giving Pop Rocks to a 5-year-old. Like, the first time you put Pop Rocks on your tongue, it's great, right? It's like exhilarating. And it's so good. And then the first time you took them, right, like after 30 seconds, you freaked out and you started spitting it all out because it was too much. It's overwhelming. You're like, this is too much.
No, you do that with soda.
Body to have, right? Like, that's what it was like all of a sudden, was you had all these people that were just like, oh my God, it's great. What do I do now? And so that led us to being able to really start solutioning. I've been a CIO basically for about 25 years. I've been road mapping every year for 25 years. This is the first year in 25 years somebody actually read my roadmap and I can start to do something with it. I can actually try to modernize. I can actually tackle tech debt, because, and I know it's not going to last forever, right? In another year, everybody's going to forget about the pandemic basically, and we're all going to go back to where we were unless I just drive it all the time. And so that's really, you know, that is by far the biggest lesson that I could ever give any leader in IT, is especially now, transparency is huge. Seize it and then give the transparency. Let people feel like they're part of the process, because just like anything that any of us do at any point, when you do something, like when you work for something together, when there's more than one person, it's a group of people, when you work at it together, you get a different type of attachment to it. You know, like if I asked you how this cup looked, you know, you would say, you know, oh, that's great because you care. You know, you would give me your opinion. But if we actually made that cup together and we both we solutioned it and we built it, like then when we looked at it, like we have a lot of stake in that game, and that's what makes it so much better. And sorry for my Boston market cup.
Both Ray and I work with a number of CIOs, really great CIOs, and I'm telling you, the CIOs like yourself that have strong technical acumen and business acumen. You know, there are no IT projects; they're all business projects. They are really not only seat at the table. I'm telling you, I have personal connections with CIOs where they're getting promoted to higher. I mean, we're talking CEO positions. They're presenting at board meetings. They have a very, I would argue, very close to being right hand, CFO, CIO, right hand, left hand to the CEO. And the pandemic has really accelerated because I think all companies and technology companies, at the end of the day, you have to have good culture, talent, and process. But man, if you're not leaning into technology, you're losing. So the CIO has an incredible role. Anyway, sorry, Ray. Go ahead. Sorry about the the advertisement for CIOs.
No, I think it's important, right? I mean, up until before the pandemic, most organizations probably had this challenge, and it was really the fact that the chief digital officer, the business unit, everybody else was doing all the fun, cool stuff. And if you didn't have a CIO CDO combination, what actually ended up with is the CIO was managing cost and dealing with infrastructure and trying to keep all the lights on while everything else was going on. But what was interesting is over the last 6 months, and I would even argue over the last 12 months, we actually seen, right, the CIO is now the grown-up in the room. And it's very, very important as people are starting to figure out, hey, why did we spend all this money on this thing? It's like, what does that do, right? And so we're coming back again, and the pendulum is swinging back. And I think the pandemic actually brought the pendulum closer to the center. Now, for you, Jason, I really, as you see and you talk to other peers that are out in the market, it's like, are there new skill sets that are expected out of you? Like, what should people bring from this?
So, you know what? Vala brought up a great point, and especially in situations like this, the more business acumen you actually have for what you're doing, that's the true accelerant. And so I've spent a solid portion of my time teaching, and we're actually at 1,000 IT team members now, even from 850 from just a couple of months ago, where we teach them everything about the mortgage business because again, first of all, there's no way you could possibly solution what you're doing if you don't actually know what you're creating. But you also, and again, back to the whole culture point and telling a story is once you understand the intrinsic value of what you're creating, the product that you're supporting, whatever it is, you start to feel more attached to the work that you're doing. And it leads to a lot more of that. And too many CIOs, CTOs, VPs, they don't spend a lot of time making sure that they understand what the business does. You're right. Ray, they manage a ton of the cost. And that's the thing. I mean, the thing is, I think we were always the grown-up in the rooms. And now it's hard for us as CIOs and CTOs to say, hey, we have to have a personality. We have to be able to talk. We have to be able to get people to see our point of view. Everything is a sales job. It's always ABC, Glengarry Glen Ross rules everything. You always have to be selling. So if you're not, and you can't embrace that, like deep down, it's going to be hard no matter what.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Such an important balance of hard skills and soft skills. To be mindful, to be empathetic, to have that sense of urgency without, being overbearing, and being a great storyteller, being a good listener, not defaulting to no as your default answer, so collaborative, creative. Is there 1,000 people in IT, and I sold infrastructure for 20 years before joining Salesforce. So data center solutions, enterprise service provider grade technology, switches, routers, access points, software security, and I know the IT staff are there talking to the business analysts. They're in the architecting new and orchestrating multi-cloud deployments on premise. We had amazing data centers. So folks that love to roll up their sleeve and get in the game. So is it quarantine fatigue? And it looks like winter's coming. I mean, the numbers aren't going down. When I say winter's coming, I mean, a second wave or continuation of the first. How are you dealing with, thinking about 2021 and how you're going to continue to, inspire your 1,000-person IT team. What advice do you have to other technology leaders to try to maybe combat what should be quarantine fatigue, since none of us have left our homes since February?
Exactly. I think the thing is we are also damn sick of sitting in our houses and not doing anything. And it doesn't matter if you love waking up every day and just, rolling out of bed in your pajamas and working. Everybody craves human interaction. They all do. Yeah. And so, one of the things that
darn video call got in the way.
and this damn video call. Thanks, Greg. And so, the thing is so for us, we're very unique. So we all work in one building, and up until the pandemic, nobody was allowed to work from home. We all came in every single day into the office. And so this created this very nice kind of hybrid model for us right now. So what I tell my team all the time is get into the office when you feel comfortable, even if it's for one day a month. Don't lose the human interaction and seeing other people and remembering what makes us special, right? Like, you got to have it. Sure. Like us sitting here right now would not be the same if we were sitting on a stage and talking about it either, because we're just going to feel closer to each other. We just are by that. You know what I mean? So that really is the biggest thing. Is we have to promote that, because as IT individuals, it's probably a little bit in our nature to want to sit behind a computer screen and never get up, right? Because we are antisocial.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. We're here with Ed McLaughlin, President. We're here with Jason Bressler. Sorry about that. EVP and Chief Technology Officer.
If you were on stage, that wouldn't have happened.
Mortgage.
If you were on stage.
So, no, if on stage, that would have been bad. But hey, Jason, thank you so much for being on the show, and really appreciate it. You can follow him and the company at UWM Lending. And of course, thank you for the insights. Very, very important, as we're talking about pandemics, post-pandemic, and where the CIO and CTO are going to be. So thanks,
Jason,
a lot.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you in the green room.
Thank you, sir. That was awesome. Very cool.
We will see you in the green room. Well, hey, we've got some special thing going on, and we're going to jump into this very interesting broadcast live. We're checking in with Dion Hinchcliffe, who's about to do something. So give us a little bit, and let's get this feed working proper.
Well, hey, we're live on the field, and we got Dion Hinchcliffe sitting at, where are you actually? What's going on?
Well, I'm way out here in the middle of nowhere. I'm in Manassas, Virginia, at the Bull Run Regional Park. Citrix has put an RV out here for us to try out future work, remote work experiments, new technologies, techniques. We've been here 2 days, having a lot of fun trying out new things.
Well, that's amazing. Wow. So what's inside? Where are you? Can we get a 360 view of what's going on?
Yeah, of course. So there's the RV right there. We're packing up. We just finished doing the shoot here. So, and it's nice in there. They have the most amazing network connection. So we've got bandwidth for myself, my wife, the kids. Everyone's got iPads and devices. We've had no problems, and it shows you can work from anywhere these days. I've been doing video calls. DisrupTV now. I just did a webinar yesterday. Not a hiccup, and I'm in the forest.
Wow. So this is the remote work in action that you've been doing for the last, how many days has this been? A couple of days?
2.5 days. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. 2.5 days out there and with your family. This is pretty amazing. So this is part of your show. You've got the whole reality TV shows going, right? This is what's happening.
Well, we're using this opportunity to launch the Constellation Research Future of Work reality show. So it'll mostly be me, but my family will also make cameos. And it's going to be like in a problem solution format. We're going to explore all the challenges and all the opportunities people are facing at home as they try and be productive, as they try and lead their careers and lives. We shot 6 episodes here. We went through and tried the kids were there making lots of noise. I'm trying to do phone calls. So we used a sonic wall, a new sonic wall from Poly. And it worked really well. I mean, they can be screaming and I can be on my calls. I can't hear them. They can't, my people on the other side of the Zoom call can't hear. So there is tech out there. We can work with our families in these little spaces in the forest now. That's the future.
Wow, tiny spaces, remote work, families, everything in place. I can't wait to see what's going on. Thanks a lot, Dion.
You bet. Thanks, Ray.
Crazy.
He looks like he's having a lot of fun.
He looks like he's having a ton of fun. So, but hey,
awesome.
you know,
That's really
hey, it's
cool.
been great. We've got Robots and Pencils sponsoring us on the show, and of course, please check them out. But who do we have coming in for episode number 214?
Episode 214. We have next week. We have Jesper Anderson, Chief Executive Officer, President of Infoblox. We have Vanessa Colella, Chief Innovation Officer, Head of City Ventures and City Productivity at Citibank. And we have Scott Zoldi, Chief Analytics Officer at FICO. So great group of executives. Vanessa is incredible. And I'm looking forward to our 655, 6, and 7 interviews.
Vala's not keeping count. Don't even worry about it. So, but hey, what a crazy week. But hey, anything on your end? What's new? What's going to happen? How's Dreamforce to you going on right now? You got all this stuff happening?
Oh my God, I have privilege of connecting with so many customers and partners. I've lost count, but all throughout November, December, I get a privilege of connecting with some of the best and brightest trailblazers in the world. And it's going to be a learning opportunity, bi-directional for me, and hopefully we can provide useful insights to our customers and prospects. It's an amazing outreach program that's gonna it's gonna be daily, and it's gonna be for the next 2 months. It's a good year to end in calendar 2020.
Really cool. Well, hey, if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Catch us 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And thanks, everyone. Please subscribe on YouTube, SoundCloud, Periscope, and anywhere else you find us. And let us know if it's illegal. So thanks a lot. Take care.